Today we are speaking about the portion in Scripture known as Parasha Vayekhel. And it deals with, it's the second last portion of Exodus that speaks about the building of the tabernacle. And I was thinking about where we are going with this story. And it's a continuous story right from the beginning of Bereshit, where our fathers created us from dust. Remember? Genesis 1, we have been created from dust, from the red clay, the Adamah. But there is a plan with our lives. Do you agree? We are not supposed to stay dusty and dry. We are supposed to be changed. And we are changed into the image of the Son. So hopefully in our talk today we can get a glimpse of what it means and where we are going to in our discussion. We start off with Exodus 35:1, and it's a summary of words that has been spoken to Moshe regarding the building of the tabernacle and the instructions that our Father has given him right from Exodus 25. It's interesting if you think about the portion or the exposure given to the creation of the heavens and the earth, to the universe, in one chapter, in Genesis. And if we speak about the reality of the tabernacle, it starts off in Exodus 25. I think it says, they will build me a sanctuary and I will dwell in their midst. The purpose of building a sanctuary is so that the Father can dwell in our midst. And as Christian properly said this morning and came out in the worship, is the focus of what we are doing is to facilitate the Father's presence and His life in our lives so that we can be a proper ambassador of the kingdom. So from Exodus 25 to Exodus 40, about the last 40% of Exodus, it speaks about the tabernacle. And then everything that happens in Leviticus is happening in and around the tabernacle. So for a very large portion of the Torah, we are dedicating our lives to learn how to live in the reality of what the Father is doing in our midst. For the living Word to dwell in our midst. And I think as we are speaking through the realities of the tabernacle, we can easily get so focused on the detail that we are sometimes losing the bigger picture. You know? So that is our challenge. So all of us are tabernacle builders. It starts off an example of Vayekhel and Aholiab in Exodus 35, and they were anointed with wisdom and with the insight on how to build. And if you think about the anointing of what they have done, is the wisdom that the Father gave them, the understanding, wisdom and understanding. Wisdom is chokmah, and it is the application of the words of our Father. And to build, it comes from the word bana, that means to take those words of wisdom and build them in such a way that we as a temple and a fellowship and a congregation can grow together so that we can be a representation of our Father's glory, of His goodness, of His presence among us. But there is an order, and we look at the example of the people that came out of Egypt and where we are now. From Egypt, they left Egypt by the strength of the power of the blood of the Lamb. Agree? The blood of the Lamb is on the doorposts of their doors, as it is to our hearts, applied to our hearts. And they were redeemed, salvation, redemption. Everything came from what the Lamb was doing in their midst. On the strength of those, they came to Mount Sinai, where the words were given to them. Firstly spoken by the Father, then given to them on stones. And the first time around, the Father says that He I will give the stones that I will write my word on. Remember? From the pavement of heaven, the stones were taken. And the tradition says that it was blue sapphire stones, that his word, the characters were burned through. It was given like, it was clear as the heavens, this blue sapphire stones. And then because of the actions of Israel while Moses was on the mountain, the stones were broken and they were written on rock. So, back to one step back to the Adamah. So, the process is the blood of the Lamb, the reception of the word, and then the confirmation of the covenant in Exodus 24 verse 8, where Moses took those words, he read it aloud to the congregation, not only the 10 words, but also the Exodus 21 to 24. And he took the blood of the bulls that were slaughtered, and he sprinkled it over the words of the altar and over the people that were present. And the covenant was confirmed. There they are. So there's a progression. Only after the covenant was confirmed in Exodus 24, the process that they went through, in 25, Moses goes up the mountain again, and the Father starts to instruct him on the way the tabernacle shall be built. So, if we look at the ideas, there is, how are we redeemed, saved? How are we getting out of our place of Egypt? Only by the blood of the Lamb. This is what Louise read this morning. We are saved through faith by grace, so that no man can boast. But then we come to a place where we do receive the word of our Father, His instructions, so that we can live a life sanctified and our lives ordered according to His plan and purposes. And as we are doing that and putting ourselves before Him, the covenant is reinforced in our lives. So the covenant that was spoken inside is taken out to the people and sprinkled over them as an evidence of our Father's walk with Him. So there is a pattern that is revealed to Moses, and we find this pattern from Exodus 25. But I was thinking, I had a crazy thought while I was preparing. Is heaven real? Is the temple actually in heaven real? Is the temple or the tabernacle, the temple, is it real in heaven? Have I got yes or no's? What do you think? Yes. Of course it's real. Is it a physical reality or a spiritual reality? Shall we just say yes to that one? Why ruin a good mystery with an answer? So, Revelations 15:2 says, and I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire. Remember this sea referring to, have we seen a sea in the temple? Remember the laver is also called a sea. Okay? So it was a sea of glass, meaning the word for sea comes from the Greek word. It's got the root of Holz, not like the German Halt, but it's like more like salt. Holz is it's a salty substance, apparently. That's where the Greek word comes from. And it's a sea of glass, not meaning that it's made of glass, but it is transparent and calm. But there's fire underneath, mingled with fire. How do we get that measure of calmness and fire all flowing together? Well, that's our story, because the overcomers were walking on that sea of glass. It says it was mingled with fire, and then they had gotten the victory over the beast and over the image and over his mark and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having harps of Elohim, and they sing the song of Moses, the servant of Elohim, and the song of the Lamb, saying, great and marvelous are thy works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are thy ways, King of the saints. And just then, after that, we get vials of wrath put on the altar. Smoke fills the temple. And then we see that the incense are thrown to the earth, which we spoke about last time I was here. So, 2 songs are sung in the heavenlies. The song of redemption and the song of victory. Remember, it's on the strength, our participation is on the strength of 2 things. By the evidence of the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. The blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Revelation 12:7 says that those who's got the testimony of Messiah and our salvation in Him, and that's obedient to the word of our Father, they are the ones who's got the right to the tree of life. Those are the ones that overcome. And I was thinking, there's a connection if you think about the heavenly reality, the tabernacle, and creation. It's one story. So in Genesis 1, it says that out of darkness, everything was spoken into being. Remember Genesis 1:1? It's from a place of tohu vavohu, where it was empty, the earth was empty and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. Yet the Spirit of our Father hovered across the face of the waters. So when our Father spoke from that reality, what was the first thing that He spoke? Yehi-or, Vayekhel. He said, let light be, and light came to be. So, 7 days of creation. 7 days of creation. In the tabernacle, there are quite a few sevens. And we're going to just briefly touch on the sevens in the tabernacle. But what happened in Genesis 1, from the time that our Father spoke, those first words, up to day 7, there was an order created where He could rule and rest on day 7. With man, and with the animals, and the fish, and the birds, and everything else. And because of Adam and Chava listening to the voice of the serpent, that order was disturbed. And exile happened. So, when exile happened, what was the second thing? What was the second exile? Let's just think about it a second. Firstly, Adam and Chava rebelled. There was exile from the garden. Okay? Then we find Avram coming to Israel. He lives in the land. He's got sons and daughters. He's got a son. I don't know about daughters. Did he have daughters? Can't remember. He had 2 sons at least. No, he had 7 sons. The song says he had many sons, so we'll argue. Anyways, the grandson Jacob had to flee out of the land because of he was exiled for 20 years because of his dealings with his brother Esau. He came back. That's the good news. The bad news is because of a dispute within his own family between Joseph and the brothers, eventually it led to them going to Egypt. So the father remembered them in Egypt, and they moved from Egypt to Sinai. And the very first day that the priesthood was inaugurated, 2 of the sons of the priesthood were exiled from the tabernacle, Nadav and Abihu, because they took the rule and the rest of the father and made it their own, interpreted it for themselves, and they didn't regard him who was present, and they were exiled. Then they had to move they wanted to move. They went with the father to the promised land, and because of the negative report of the spies, they were turned around, and that generation died. Then they went to Israel, and they spent time in Israel, and they were removed in exile at least twice, because they take the rule, and that's what we do, is we take the words that the Father gives us, and we don't regard the words, and we don't regard His presence. And what Christian said this morning, of the words that he got from PD, is exactly where I am today. Is we can become so focused on the detail and the things that we are doing right here, as we forget in whose presence we are and why we are doing these things. This is our challenge. As we prepare our hearts for Pesach, and we are coming to face the King, We are called to do things a little bit different. So in the building of the tabernacle, there are 7 speeches. So Exodus 25:1 it starts, and to 30 verse 10 there are 3 speeches. The first one, now when I go through this, think of the reality in the creation days and think of the reality in the tabernacle and try to join. It's a parallelism. Alright? So the first day it says, Yehi or Vayehi or, the Father said, let light be, and light came to be. So in the starting portion of Exodus 25, for the giving of the words of our Father, how to build this tabernacle, we find light to be the first portion. It is light in the tabernacle, and in the priesthood it is garments of glory. Those two go together. So the second day has got a connection of tax. So because Exodus 20, late in 25, it speaks about those that are bringing a half a shekel of tax. What's the division? Remember in Genesis, it was the waters above and the waters below. There was a division. These are divided. Are you older than 20 years, ready to fight, or below 20 years? That division afterwards became those who would live into the promised land, and that generation who would die. And then we find in day 3, what was day 3 in creation? Between the sea and the dry land, division was created. So we find on the third speech that the molten sea was discussed, the laver. And in speeches 4 to 5, we find day 4 and 5 as a reality. Day 4 is luminaries, Genesis 1:14. The luminaries were put into place to govern by day and night, the heavenly authorities. At the end of day 4, creation was ready to be populated. Day 5 and 6 was the population of everything that was created up to that point. It's also interesting that, I wonder if I should draw this. I can draw this. All right. 7 words that the scriptures start off with. I can't write it now, it's going to take too much time. But you know them. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz. You know them. Okay? In the beginning our Father created heaven and earth. You know them. Alright, so let's just start with the first word. Bereshit. You see it? Bereshit. Bara. Elohim. And then let's just make this one Aleph Tav. Et. Okay, that's one word. Et. Hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz. Can you sort of find it? Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz. You see it? I hope you see it. The 4th day, the heavenlies, earth and heaven was ready for the reception of. What was then day 5? What was created in day 5? The fish and the birds. Day 6, beasts and man. In the 4th millennia, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's also interesting if you look at the menorah on the 4th calendar, it is the representation of the Ruach Elohim. On the 4th one, the central axis is when Messiah came. The Aleph Tav, the beginning and the end. The 4th millennium, he came to the earth to proclaim the goodness, the good news of the kingdom. So, day 5, or the 5th speech, is incense that fills the air, like the birds fill the heavens and teeming with life. So if you go into the holy place, into the Holy of Holies, and the incense of the incense altar is burned, then it's thick. The presence of our Father is there. And day 6 and 7, we find that Bezalel and Oholiab is anointed with the breath of Elohim, the Ruach Elohim. He's anointed with to do all that is commanded. What was in the garden? 2 people were anointed to do all that is commanded. 3 places in the Torah, as far as I know, Ruach Elohim is mentioned. The first one is with Adam and Chava. The second one was with, who would you think? Surprise. What do you think? Joseph. Joseph says, it said of Joseph that this man has got a Ruach of Elohim in him. The third one is Bezalel and Holiab. So that's the 7 speeches. The 7th one is Exodus 31 verse 13 is the sign that is given. What is the sign that's given? And the 7th day our Father rested. And He ruled and rested on the earth, and everything was completed. And He said, it is Tov Me'od. Very good. So, in this chapter 31, it's spoken of the Shabbat as the sign of that the Father's fullness has been created and He can rest in our midst. So as the days of creation went on, it is repeated in the microcosm of the tabernacle that we can meet in, that we can facilitate, that facilitates His presence to the point where we can enter through the door, which is the truth, the way, and the life, to come to the Father and to worship Him with everything that we have. Just so that you know, Leviticus starts off with the priesthood, who is ordained in 7 days. So the 7 days from creation is transferred into the tabernacle to the priesthood. Isaiah 11, into the 7-fold manifestation of the Ruach of our Father, speaks about the 7 festivals, the 7 churches. There's sort of a pattern here. So, the priesthood in Leviticus 8, it said that they will not go out of the tabernacle for 7 days. On the 8th day they will be consecrated. So for 7 days they were in the tabernacle as a repeating of the story. So there is a hope for the ultimate fulfillment of the tabernacle picture. What will be the ultimate fulfillment of the tabernacle picture, do you think? The tabernacle went to Shiloh. How many years was it there? 468, I think it was. Why did it cease to exist? Of Eli and Hophni and Phinehas and that whole sorry scene that took place. Because of unrighteousness of Israel, the enemy came and destroyed it. The tabernacle was destroyed. Both temples were destroyed and corrupted because of going into exile. Why did they go into exile? Because we took the words of the Father and corrupted it. We disregarded His presence, we disrespected Him, and it was removed. So, but Israel expected the fullness of the ultimate temple, and still do. Just look at the news. They still do. But there is a revelation of the fullness of the temple that we see and that we saw in the person of Messiah Yeshua. Because when Messiah came, a new revelation came into the midst of Israel. So that we can see that through Messiah, through His death and resurrection, the fullness of His presence that came to dwell with us. He said, after He was resurrected and He was on His way to be in the ascension, He said, I will leave my spirit, the spirit of Adonai, the spirit of Yotevavai, I will leave with you to lead you into all truth. Remember, Ezekiel 36 says, the purpose for the Spirit in your life and in my life is to lead you into all truth. So, Messiah is the temple. We can see that. The Word says that. And as we are growing into the image of Messiah, as we are coming close, and as we are worshipping Him and entering through the door, we become, you and I, we become that small little representations of the tabernacle in our lives, and we worship Him. So, 1 Peter 2:5 says, you also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house, a set-apart priesthood to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to our Father through Messiah. You are becoming lively stones. Where do we come from? We were clay initially. This was my thought pattern this week. We were clay, infused with the Spirit of Adonai. We were clay. The Spirit of our Father breathes into us. We accept our Father now as the Creator. We acknowledge Him. We turn from our blindness, our stupidity, and we acknowledge Him to be the Creator of heaven and earth. Messiah as the King of Kings. From that moment, we are being transformed from clay into a precious stone. You agree? Can you see the picture? I hope so. So, the question stands, is the temple in heaven real? You think? What does Revelation say? I'm going to take you a little bit on a... What does Revelation say? Teens jy weet nie. So, Father instructs Moses, and he says that see that you make everything. You represent everything that you are making here as the pattern that you saw in heavens. Okay? So there must be a pattern. What does it look like? We don't know. But we know the representation, and we study the representation to understand the spiritual reality of what's happening in the heavens. So Revelation 8 says, the prayers of our Father's people, our prayers, ascends to the golden altar, the altar of incense. So at least there's an altar of incense. Verse 5 says, the angel took the censer and filled it. What is the purpose of the censer in the earthly tabernacle? Filled with incense and with coals, hot coals, and it's taken into the presence of our Father. So he fills the censer with fire from the altar. So there's a censer, there's incense, there is a altar. 11:9 says our Father's temple in Shemaim opened and revealed the Ark of the Covenant. His throne is there. So there are elements in Revelations that we know there's a physical, there is a real temple. Physical or spiritual. There's a real temple in the heavens. And the reason our Father gave us this tabernacle and the temples, one reason only, is so that He can dwell in our midst. Because the purpose of the garden that was placed just on the eastern side of Eden was so that man could mingle, man could commune, man could have a relationship with our Father. So this same reality is recreated for us in the tabernacle, in the temple, so that we can go and worship the Father, that we can have communion with Him. Can I ask you a question? North of us there is a little town called Little Jerusalem. Do you know that? Oudtshoorn. It's called Klein Jerusalem. If the temple was in Oudtshoorn, how often would you go? If the temple in those, I'm talking about those days, if this was the distance that you had to travel, where the Shekhinah, the manifested glory of our Father, was there, and you could go and see His manifested glory, how often would we go? Think about that. It's an interesting question. Would you go every day? Pardon? It's an interesting idea. Remember, it said of Moses when the tent of meeting was set up in the wilderness that he came and he left, no? But Joshua remained. So, billions of people across the face of the earth would come up. When I was in Israel in 2019, one of the ministers, he was a rabbi. Was it Ben Gavir? I think it was him. He said he said, a question was asked, why are you building this high-speed trains and the airport in Elat and so forth? He says, we are expecting the Messiah to return. And pilgrims from across the world will flow into Israel, and we need to create the infrastructure for them to do so. Imagine having your 10-year plan or your 20-year plan of your country based on the coming of Messiah. You know? So, Exodus 29:43 says, I will meet with the children of Israel, and the tabernacle shall be sanctified by my glory, will be made holy by my glory. Remember, the angels cry, holy, holy, holy is Adonai of hosts, and the whole earth will see his glory. His set apartness, his holiness is manifested in his glory. So, there I will be sanctified. And if you go to the temple, tabernacle, you will see his glory. The problem becomes when you see his glory every day. What about the nation of Israel that lived around his glory for 40 years? Tested him 10 times in the wilderness. We live 10 kilometers from the ocean. Well, not to compare the two, but in any case, people travel thousands of miles to come and spend time on our beaches. When last have you been to the beach? We become used to where we live. They became used to the presence of the Father. And this is the risk, is that we can start to take his presence with us as it's the normal thing. Do you know what? The presence of the Father resides within our lives. Do we see it as unusual, as unique, as precious as what it would have been to get into your car, go over the Utinikwa Pass, and as you turn left onto Oudtshoorn, you start to see the glory of our Father above Oudtshoorn. Think of how far would you drive, and when would you start walking, and when would you start crawling? You know? So the tabernacle acts as an earthly representation of the heavenly. That's what Hebrews says. The unification of heaven and earth, like the Garden of Eden was, this was where our Father resides. So if you've got a question, and you know for sure you're going to get an answer, you go. When there is a problem, be careful, because you can get an answer. You can be part of the problem. So there is the fear of Adonai is the beginning of wisdom. So I think seeing a visible representation instills a little bit of fear, more so than what I am aware that our Father dwells within me. So, Hebrews 9:23 says that these are copies of the heavenly things. However, did you know, and this is why I'm asking the question, what happens in the new heavens and a new earth, the new creation? What happens to the temple? What happens to the temple? Let me show you. I need a lappie. If I have a lappie, I can show you. Come, mommy, where's the lappie? In die boks. In die boks. Nou moet ek net die boks kry. The money of the box. Nothing. This is an interesting idea, is that Revelation says that the new heavens and the new earth will not need a temple. There was the tabernacle. There was the tabernacle which got destroyed because of sin. There was the first temple. There was the second temple. Apparently there will be a third temple. They got destroyed because of sin. In between here is a garden. We came from a garden initially. where the presence of our Father resided. When we in sin moved away from Him, He came after us and He created a tabernacle, a temple, exile. He came after us. He brought us back to the land. A second temple, exile. He brought us back. The promise of a third temple exists. Ezekiel, go and read it. Ezekiel 40 to 48. As far as I know, that will be the only temple that will not be destroyed. But it will not last more than 1,000 years. Because something happens when the earth are recreated. Revelation says that in the new heavens and the new heavens and the new earth, in the new Jerusalem, will not include a temple. For its temple is Adonai Elohim, the Almighty and the Lamb. Why is there no temple in the new Jerusalem? Quick answer. Ek kan nie hoor nie om daar te sê. No sin. Yes, we've got a full revelation. Actually what happened is during the Shabbat age, that's just ahead of us, we will get a full revelation of who our Father is and Messiah is. And after that we will be prepared, fully prepared, to enter into a structure of 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles. It's a cube. Where have we seen a cube in the tabernacle? The Holy of Holies. So we are invited into the Shemini Atzeret, the day 8 of Sukkot. We are invited into the Olam Haba, into the world to come, so that we are going to live in the full reality of what the Father has prepared for us. So, verse 23 says, "And the city had no need of the sun, neither the moon to shine in it, for the glory of Elohim lightened it, and the Lamb is the light thereof." In the new creation, is there going to be, this is a question, a sun, moon and stars? The shaking of the head. Is that what we are doing? Of course there is going to be a sun, moon and stars. The scripture just said it. No need of the sun, neither the moon to shine in it, because it's in the city. What about the earth? What was this, the light that was shining in the Holy of Holies? The presence of the Father resided in the Holy of Holies. That's why it says, the brilliance of the Father's presence. Remember in the beginning when He said, Yehi or Vayekhel, the light shone and our Father said it was good. The sun, moon and stars only came later. The same light returns. The one that we will see in the garden. So, we are returning to the fullness of the first creation, living in the garden. And through taking the words of our Father and His Ruach that He is giving to us, to take it to be what it is, for application in our lives, for wisdom and for understanding, to be able to walk towards our Father, to be restored and renewed to the point where our red dust is infused with His Spirit, so that we can become a precious stone. That's where we are going. Because remember, there is very little need for clay and dust in the New Jerusalem. Have you seen it? The pavement is made out of gold. Where is the ground? We need to be transformed. So, in His presence, we shall learn that the glory of man is not in our pursuance of power, which is what the whole world is about. In our personal lives and in corporate and in national status, it is for the right to exist, and the way that you are going to do it is what I say it is. That's the power that we exert in our lives. But we change that and we lay that down because we realize that it's not ours to have. We are a delegated authority from the Father, but the power resides in Him. And then we take that and that's converted into compassion for those around us, so that we can live the love of the Father out to those that surround us. That's what Philippians said that Messiah has done. He says, Messiah made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a servant, and he was made in the likeness of men, to serve. If we pray to Messiah, if we speak to him when you're lying in your bed, when you're doing what you're doing, or you're sitting and focus on him, what does he look like? Think of it. What is the image that you have of Messiah when you speak to him? Is it, I've got a beautiful image that Jane with her hat made for us in my living room of Messiah reaching out, the story of Peter on the water, walking on the water. It's a mosaic story that he reaches out and grabs you by the hand. And so what is the image of Messiah that you've got in your mind when you're speaking to him? Think of it. Is he the Messiah that walked on the earth 2,000 years ago as the suffering servant, laying his life down for his fellow man, coming, reaching out to the children? Is that our image of Messiah? Let me tell you, that's not the correct image. Because he is, at the moment, he is standing up to be the King of Kings. Think of this transformation, because remember, he was glorified by the Father when he was resurrected. The image that we saw him on earth was a representation of his compassion, of his love. But the fullness of his existence is not limited to that. The fullness of who he is almighty. Go and read John 1. It says, through him the world was created. So he is the King of Israel. You agree? He is the King of Kings and he is the King of righteousness. Think when we speak to him. Who do we speak to? When you are driving around in the car and you're just thinking flippantly of Messiah and you have a quick word with him, think of where we are speaking to. Because remember, he is the King of the ages. From beginning into the new creation, he will be the King. When you think of glory, remember Isaiah, where is it? Isaiah 6, where he was bowing down and he saw the glory of the seraphim and the throne room. When Israel stood back because of the breaking of the cedars and the words of her father that was rolling down the mountain. That's the one that you are speaking to. The problem is, we are living 10 kilometers from the ocean and we never go. Same story in our lives. As we think we are speaking to someone that's standing as a friend next to us. We have lost, to a large extent, we have lost the awe and the respect for the King of glory. This is our problem. That was the problem why we lost access to the tabernacle, why we lost access to the temple first time, second time. That's why Adam and Chava was in the presence of the Father, in the Ruach of the evening. They were walking with the Father in the garden and they sacrificed that because they got too accustomed with it. So, remember we're dust, created to be clay. The moment that we are giving our lives to our Father, we're in a process of transformation. How is a gem transformed from red clay? Because in that red clay is all the resources needed for a gem to be formed. All the minerals, everything else is there for a gem to be formed. How is a gem formed? Crystal, agate. How is those things? Diamonds. How is it formed? Through pressure, through fire, tribulation. All the difficult things that we don't want to experience in our lives. But the Father said that He is faithful and true. He will help us to be transformed. Whatever pressure you need in your life to be transformed, that's what we will have for the long run. Remember, if we are in our lives, and in your life and in my life, we are going to have an encounter with the King of Kings. Panei el Panei. And whoever we think He is, what He looks like, doesn't matter. It's in the end what He thinks of us. That's what matters. And He said that because of our acceptance and our testimony of Him to be the King of Kings, puts us in a place of innocence. Remember, we are not judged by the law. This is what it says. The curse of the law has been removed from us because our acceptance of Messiah as our Redeemer, the one that gives us our salvation, that brings us in through the door into the tabernacle. Now we are in His presence. Now we've got the privilege to learn His word. The blue sapphire stone. We've got that privilege because out of love, respect, fear, awe, so that we can go out and be ambassadors of this reality in the tabernacle. We are called to turn from that dust to a gem. That transformation is painful. If you were a gem, and I think we all are, we should be, we are being transformed. In what shape would you be? Would you want to be? In what shape would you want to be to bring glory and honor to the one to whom you belong? In that shape. That's just tumbled. That came down a river. Tumbled, nicely, cool, calm, you see the scenery. That's just tumbled. In what shape would you want to be when you face the King of Kings? Polished, different faceted, to shine, translucent. You know what it means? We open ourselves to the diamond cutter. We are not called to an easy road, that I can tell you. We are called to one that we are being tumbled, polished, cut in different facets, so that we can resemble, be transformed into the image of the Son. We started off as red clay. Hey! We started off as red clay. Zzz. But through pressure and turmoil, we are being changed to reveal His light. My wife bought me a new toy. Now you can see. So, Revelation 4:3 says, He who sat there. What gem is that, by the way? Do you know? It's a jasper, actually. A jasper, a red jasper. Think of the one who sits on the throne. There was like jasper and a ruby stone in appearance. There was a rainbow all around the throne, an emerald in appearance. The city had a great high wall. What was it made of? Of jasper. The thing is, jasper changes. We start as red clay, and then through a little bit of turmoil in your life, you turn into a stone like that. But now, what is the evidence of? What is the evidence of that? It is the red Adamah that's in our lives. Some of the soil, the earthliness, the soulishness that remains in our lives. Can you agree with that? It's just a picture. What needs to happen with that thick red residue that's left in that stone? It needs to be washed out with the Word. It needs to be cleared up. Because if we can drill a hole into that stone and you put a light into that. Is there a light going to shine from that stone? What do you think? Any yeses? No takers. But as that's a red jasper too, that is polished in a different phase of its existence. But as it goes on, it can get to a point where you can shine a light through it, and it becomes translucent. That's where we are heading. It's so that the walls of the New Jerusalem will be built with the evidence. What does 1 Peter 2:5 say? We will become living stones into walls. That will be us. If we can get rid of the thickness that we are experiencing at the moment. And you know what that thickness, that our soulish understanding is doing to us? It causes division, it causes strife, confusion. It takes the focus away from where the Father is calling us to go. So the Hebrew word for jasper represents purity, beauty, and the glory of Adonai. But it starts there. It starts with something that looks like compacted hard mud. Yasve means glittering. How do we get from that place to a place where, are we a reflection? This is the thing. Are we a reflection of the light of Messiah? Are we supposed to be? No, we're not. I don't think we are. I think what happens is that the Father takes the Spirit of Adonai and He infuses it into our lives so that the light of Messiah shines from the inside out. It's His light, it's His energy, it's His reality. But if we are a reflection, we can be that, just with a polished surface. But if we clear up our soulishness and we become that, then if you put a light bulb into that thing, it can shine, it can glow. Think when we walk around the city of Jerusalem. It's going to take a while, but if you walk around the city of the New Jerusalem, what are you going to see? The light of the Father and Messiah shining through the wall, 1,500 miles high, were the foundation stones of the apostles, with the gates of the 12 tribes. This is where we as humanity is developing into. 1 John 3:2 says, we know that if He is manifested, we shall be like Him. Remember what we read in Revelation 4:3? I saw one sitting on a throne like jasper. We shall be like Him, because we shall see Him even as He is. So, if we think about walking on the streets of heaven, who walked on the streets of heaven before? Humanity. Moses and the 70 elders. Remember when they went up the mountain and they had a meal with our Father? Exodus 24:10, and they saw Elohim of Israel, and they were under His feet as it were paved work of sapphire stone, and as it were the body of heaven in His clearness. The sapphire stone that they were walking on were as clear as the blue sky that we see. And when Moses went up the mountain, the cloud of our Father's presence covered it. So, the very heaven for clearness. What is the purpose of the word of our Father? Remember, firstly, it was written on sapphire stone, clear as the heavens, so that we can see what it means. It's transparent. There's nothing that's going to surprise us. It's here. It's understandable. But we are clouding it. bringing things in or taking stuff out that is important, that reveals the Father's character. And eventually we end up with the word written on stone. That was plan B. The Father said, you are not ready for sapphire yet. Take it on stone. Because that's a representation of your hearts. As our hearts are being changed and renewed, the Father takes that reality of His Word and His character and writes it on the flesh of our hearts through Ezekiel 36, 25, 26. It says that He takes His Word and His Spirit and He writes His Word on our hearts so that we can be obedient and live a life of holiness and set apartness. Exodus 24:17 says, the sight of the glory of Adonai was like a devouring fire on top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel. So, we must know when we approach the Father, this is His reality. Don't be surprised, because the people that were standing on the sea of glass, that speaks of glittering reality of what happens in the sea, the laver. What happens in the laver? Because they were standing on a sea that represents the laver. How do you get to the laver? You lay yourself down as a living sacrifice. Firstly, you come in through the door. You lay, Romans 12 too, you lay yourself down as a living sacrifice. Then you are slaughtered. You are taken and washed in the laver. And if you come out there, you are ready. So what they have been going through is through a period of pressure, of turmoil. The saints of the tribulation. And when they were prepared, they stood on that sea of calmness, of transparency, because they saw the Father. So we can look at sapphire stone. That is sapphire in its raw form. And this is what the Word can look like when we approach it the first time. So, let me ask you this. When you come to this place, when you come to any place where our Father's name is mentioned, where you get together with brothers and sisters and we're speaking about His reality, His goodness, His presence, do we expect a meeting with the Father? When we came to this place this morning, did we come to assemble? Because remember, that's what Moses did, Vayekhel, and he called the kahal to assemble as the edut, as the witnesses of the nation of Israel. That's what happened in Exodus 35. The same here. Handeli sent out a notice to the kahal saying, guys, we are going to meet here at 10 o'clock on a Shabbat morning. Let's come here. We are the Eidah. We are the called out assembly. We are the witnesses of His glory. Come here to hear the words of the Father, and we come here. Do we expect to hear His voice? To have a meeting with Him? Or we just come? And I think that expectation makes a small difference to our experience. It's because this can easily be a place that we just come to on a Shabbat morning. What's our expectation? Do we see the Word like someone that discovers it in the field and picks it up and says, oh, this is a nice stone, it's got potential. And he puts it in his pocket and he walks off. Or does this stone become a polished surface, something in your life that shines, a gem that you would like to show and share with everyone, as a representation of the Father's Word, of His presence in your life? Zechariah 9:14 says, Adonai shall be seen over them, and His arrow shall go forth as a lightning, and the Lord God shall blow the trumpet. You remember the first time He blew the trumpet? How did Israel react when the first time that He blew the trumpet? We are going to be at the blowing of this trumpet. Let's prepare our hearts now. They had 3 days to prepare. We've got time to prepare. Adonai of hosts shall defend them, and they shall devour and subdue, and sling with stones, and they shall drink and make a noise as through wine. Happy, I should say. And they shall be filled like bowls, and as the corners of the altar. So, who's the Father speaking to in Zechariah? Who's he speaking to? To the community of believers. Primarily Israel. We are grafted into the olive tree. We are not Jews, but we become part of the family of Adonai, being grafted in. Those are all sapphire, different colors of sapphire. It says, the following verse, and Adonai the Elohim shall save them in that day as the flock of his people, and they shall be as the stones of a crown. The even, stones here is even. The evenim is these stones in his hands. Even is a contraction of the Father and the Son. Av and Ben becomes even. But even comes from the root bana, and it means to build. Even comes from a root bana, it means to build. So what does it say? Our Father shall save them in that day as the flock of his people, and they shall be as people ready to build. What are they building? There's the mention of a crown. They shall be ones that are building in the presence of a crown. The crown is the word netzer, and it means dedication, consecration, something that's set apart. What are we busy building? Are we building a set-apart community? One that is following the Father with truth and in spirit, walking together, supporting one another? They will be lifted up as an ensign upon his land. An ensign is the word nasas, and it means to glow from afar. So the ones that are ready to build as living stones, you remember those pretty jaspers? Those ones are coming close, and they are submitting their lives. Here am I, my jewel. Build me as part of this set-apart community, so that it will not be, as Matthew 5 says, a light under a bushel, but on a hilltop that is shining to the people in whose presence we live. 1 Peter 2:5 says, we are lively stones built up in a spiritual house. And the sapphires can be part of a crown in different forms. We are not one identity. Various people, various populations, various colors are joined together. Together are forming the crown of our Father. So, you know what? This is a bit of a difficult story for me to share. Firstly, I've got a confession. I used to work for Eskom. Okay, that's the confession. 24 years living next door to Alice, working for Eskom. I started my electrical career in Eskom, and I was trained as a high voltage electrician. That's what I was doing. From 22,000 volts to 400,000. That's where my life was. And firstly, two things happen to your life. You lose your fear for heights, because heights become second nature to you. And when you are walking on a pylon that is 28 meters high, you go from the one point of the transom to the 12 meters across, and you don't attach your belt because you're walking nicely and safely over the 40 millimeter angle iron. And so things happen in your life where you get accustomed to your environment. Heights is the first thing. The power of electricity is the second thing. Because you know what, when you're working in a distribution station, a high voltage station, 275,000 volts are flowing 3 or 4 meters, maybe 4 meters above you. So much so that if you pick up a fluorescent tube on its own, it will glow because of the induction into the air, the corona, not the same one that you're thinking about. So, unfortunately, it's a two-edged sword. Because as you are walking, Prepare yourself. As you're walking in this distribution station with this rattling of electricity above you, you realize you should focus. Because if you don't, you don't. Okay? So, it so happened that this story went pretty well when I told it to myself before. I don't know, it must be these 4 tiles. So it happened 28 years ago, January. And when I was thinking about this, I thought of Aaron's life. Aaron was a father that had 2 sons, more than 2 sons, but he had 2 sons, Nadav and Abihu. And Aaron was called in a setting of the tabernacle to perform, to work, and to keep. That's what we are doing, working and keeping. And in the very first day that was supposed to be glory and goodness, his 2 sons died because of the fire, because they disrespected the one who called them. Whatever they did, there was a measure of disrespect. So I had 2 guys that worked with me, Simon and Amos. And Simon was the leader of the 2. And he just returned from the December leave, early January, and we went out to a bigger project in the Valwater area. I was working up in Wombat. And so the day we arrived, just a standard setting. And I'm sorry for... But we got up into a place, 22,000 volts. The normal procedure would be, I give the instruction what we are going to do. There is a jumper that is turned through the wind, is turned near to a stay, and sometimes in windy conditions you do trip the line. Okay, so we're there just to change it, just to turn it, no problem. So the procedure is I put on my overall, the guys put out the ladder, I write out the operation instructions, because I need to confirm this with the control center. They need to kill the line on the other side before this happens. And then I would get up, do the work, come down, it's done. All right? Easy. So the guys ask me, can I put up the ladder? I say, go for it. I'm getting dressed, writing out the operation instructions, and the next moment, when I look up, in the corner of my eye, I see a young man, father of 2, reaching out, touching the line. Because in his month of being on leave, lost focus, thought it's the normal thing to do, he lost respect for electricity. And as he reached out, he turned into a huge ball of fire. And I was standing there, and he came down 13 meters high, and he fell in front of my feet, smoldering. And he was destroyed. He was burned to pieces. Instantly died. And I was unable to function. What do you do? Do you try to do first aid? What do you do? This is your friend. So, I did nothing. So he was killed. I know he was burned. There's holes in his body all over. There's no way that he survived it. And I had a little dog, Cookie. She was always going with me. And I found her in the Milliland 2 kilometers away. She just got such a fright. And I was thinking this week, you know what? What was in Aaron's heart when his 2 sons were killed in the same way? How could he function? What was expected of him? Go on. In the evidence of this huge thing that just happened with you right now, changed your life, changed my life completely. It's 38 years ago, still in my life. How do you keep on functioning? But you know what? The Father calls us to certain moments in our lives that we need to learn from, that we need to find the message in there. I can tell you many stories of near misses with electricity. Because as you are functioning in the presence of such power, you become complacent. It's normal. You can almost touch it, it will be okay. When our King comes, the King of Kings, when He comes, how will He find us? In what state will He find us? Because you and I are busy in the same way that I used to work in the electrical field. We are busy dealing with a Father that brings nourishment, that brings life, that brings provision. That's the same thing that happens in the environment that I used to work. But He is a living being. He is our Father. And in relationship, we can be changed and renewed. So, look at the detail. Apparently the detail is important. We can gain life and revelation from the detail that's in the tabernacle. But every time you get out of your bucky and you look at what you are doing, think why. Why are we here? Why have we been singing these songs? Why is the team prepared to lead us into worship? Because you know what? As I got out of my bucky and approached this line, we got out of our vehicles and we sat down here and we prepared to speak to the King of Kings. So we can sit here, we've got a choice. We can sit here and be critical of what's happening around you, thinking of the guy next to you not hitting every note, sort of a thing. Or we can be focused in our hearts on where we are in the presence of our Father. And that's what the revelation of the tabernacle is teaching us. Whenever we approach, remember the Father is there. Whenever you approach your prayer closet, whenever we approach a place of worship, of speaking to Him, the reality of our Father is there. We are meeting the King of Kings, the King of Glory, the King of all ages, the one who has called us to this place and given you and me a task to perform, to be representatives of this kingdom. How are we doing? When last have you been to the ocean? That's the question. How intense is our motivation, our respect, and our fear to enter His presence? We can go through turmoil. We can go through all sorts of crises in our lives. What becomes the problem? What becomes the focus? Still the Father or the crisis? Because if we view the Father through the crisis, we've got a problem because we change it. But if you view the crisis through the eyes and the revelation of what the Father gives, it's a different story. Then we have peace, His joy, and His reality within us. It depends on how we view this. Whatever we do when we study the Word, especially the tabernacle, is let us not study the tabernacle for the sake of knowledge, but let us study it for the sake of being in wonder and awe of what the Father is doing. So, if we can be in awe of the majesty of our Father and realize that all of this beautiful detail of the Word is secondary, then we are ready to walk closer to Him. But if we get so intermingled and focused on the detail that we forget about the reason why we are there, we've missed the whole point. So, our Father really wants to, and this is why He gives it to us, and the splendor and the beauty of everything that He gives is overwhelming to our senses. And it is meant to overwhelm our senses. The incense overwhelms you when you're inside. The smell of fresh bread in the holy place will overwhelm you. Just come here on a Friday morning, you'll have it. The lighting of the menorah, the incense altar, everything, it's there to have an impact on our senses. But let's not be led by our senses. Let's be led by the Spirit and walk in the truth of the Word. So, when we study this, let us do so in the light of His glory. Let us not do it from an academic, information, knowledge point of view. Because the moment we do that, it's gone. All the glory is gone. We sit with a piece of mud, and we don't have the revelation of the blue sapphire. So, when we approach the King, when we came to Him initially, He changed us into a jewel from a red piece of mud and clay. Remember, there are millions of human beings out there that are living a life of producing vegetables and seeds that are planted. It's good. The problem is, our Father has called us to become jewels in His kingdom, to become part of the walls, good catch, the walls of Jerusalem. That's what He has called us to be. So let's see our higher calling and become transparent, translucent, for the sake of worshipping our King. So why is the Shekhinah oops, Rosie, what happened? Why is the Shekhinah not visible in our lives anymore? Josh, can you just get that back? Why is the Shekhinah not in our lives as visible as what it was in the day of the tabernacle? And this is a question that we probably don't have an answer for. I think if we can place our hearts in a position where we are asking the Father, Father, we are at this place in our lives, and we ask you to come and cleanse us. Ephesians has got the promise that Messiah will wash us with His living word, where He prepares us as the bride, and we will be fully prepared to stand in the presence of our Father as becoming one of the living stones in the temple. Thank you, Josh. We've got a challenge in our hands. We are approaching, Christian said, 7 times 3. 3 sevens. We spoke about sevens this morning. We've got 21 days to prepare our hearts, to get to the place where we are renewing a place where we are saying, Father, here we are. We accept the salvation of Messiah. You are our Redeemer. We are following you. We are sanctified. We are changed in our lives because of what you're doing. Because of the infusion of your Spirit into our lives is causing the dirt to filter out of our lives so that we can be translucent gems in your presence. Joshua Vayekhel said, I did not ask for success, but I asked for wonder. So let us not try to be successful in understanding every mystical element of the Word for the sake of the understanding a mystery. But let us understand the heart of the Father as He is calling you and me to reach out in compassion and in love to the world and be a representation of the kingdom, be an ambassador, not like some ambassadors, but an ambassador that brings life and joy and peace and speak of the kingdom in a way that will bring glory to the Father. Okay. In our study next week, remember where this leads to. This study next week ends with the glory and the presence of the Father filling the tabernacle to the point where Moses and Aaron couldn't enter. You and I are tabernacles. This is the will of the Father in our lives, is to fill our hearts and our minds with His Spirit to the point where we can't stand, but we can only stand in Him. We cannot stand on our own. Next week is the climax of the whole purpose of building the tabernacle, is that the presence of the Father will reside in our lives, so that we can live a life to the full knowledge of who He is when we are walking in this life. Father, help us through your mercy and your grace to have a thorough knowledge of your presence with us. Father, we acknowledge and we know and we confess that we haven't got a proper understanding and respect for your closeness and your presence in our lives. Help us, Father, to have a fresh revelation of who you are, so that we can follow you and walk after you in spirit and in truth. In everything that we do, in everything that we say, every place we put our feet, Father, may it be a blessing to you and for the purposes of the kingdom. May in everything that we do acknowledge the greatness and the goodness of our King, our Creator, our Father, our Messiah. Help us that when we approach you and when we speak to you, we will have the proper respect and the awe for your presence. Father, we glorify you and we praise you. We thank you for the privilege of being here together on the Shabbat. Exodus 35 starts with us assembling on the Shabbat. Because even the building of a tabernacle had to cease when the Shabbat came. The building of our tabernacles is subsequent of experiencing your presence on the Shabbat. So Father, as we assemble here, this kahal, may we be drawn to you every day more and more, so that our lives can be polished, renewed, and so that the splendor and the glory that you are planning for us to be part of the crown, part of the living stones in the walls of Jerusalem, that we will attain that, Father, through your mercy and grace and your Spirit. Father, help me, help everyone here not to be a dull stone in the wall, but that we will be able to shine your light through our lives. We thank you and you praise you for the privilege to be called and to be part of your family. We worship you, Father. Amen.